Welcome to Discernment Now. My name is Rich Van Every with Kevin Anthony, and we're looking at some of the news stories of this past week with discernment. So it has been a pretty juicy week, I would say, Kevin.
You know, every week these days is a juicy week. It used to be that most weeks were quiet and every once in a while there'd be something to get people all riled up.
Yeah.
But now there's literally something almost every day, every other day, at least 2 or 3 a week.
Yeah.
Something big or crazy going on.
Right.
And I think that's by design.
It is. They just want to stack on top and just bring in a sense of overwhelm, confusion, and basically leave you with learned hopelessness, a term that you should know all about.
Yeah, overwhelm, confusion, and put you in a state of fear because you can't make good decisions when you're operating from a place of fear.
The amygdala shuts down. So we're not going to let that happen. We're going to dose ourselves adequately with the information overwhelm and talk about the things that are going to help sharpen our tool set and bring in real understanding of discernment so we can know what to pay attention to and what to take action on, more likely than not.
All right, well, let's start with the first big one here, which is the Trump indictment. So what I find interesting, and we can report the facts and we will talk about some of the facts about the case. But what I find interesting here is not so much the facts, but the situation itself. So what do I mean by that? So we have, of course, Trump saying that it never happened. And of course, everybody's going to go, well, of course, he's the one being accused. Of course, he says it didn't happen. But apparently, Stormy Daniels has also said it didn't actually happen. So if there's no victim, there's no crime, right?
Yeah.
So that's part of it.
Right.
Then we have the fact that after the indictment was unsealed, we see that there's 34 counts of basically business reporting,
virtually the same
violations.
thing.
Well, it's the exact same thing 34 times, but it's nothing more than a paperwork misdemeanor. So how in the world are they indicting him on a felony if there's 34 counts of a misdemeanor? And it's really interesting because Alvin Bragg, the prosecutor, hasn't told us. Yeah, hasn't told us how this is possible. Now, we know that they're trying to link it to an election violation. However, one of the members of the election commission has recently come out publicly and said, this is not a violation in any way. So Trump says it doesn't happen. Stormy Daniels says it didn't happen. And the election commission, Federal Election Commission, says even if it did happen, it's not a violation of any Federal Election Commission laws. Yeah. So the whole thing makes zero sense whatsoever unless you put on your discernment goggles.
Yeah.
Right? And you realize that this has nothing to do with the law or violating election or business reporting laws or anything like that. It has to do with we need to stop Trump from running for president at all costs.
Right.
Now, personally, I think this is a really risky move for them because it is by far the weakest case. I mean, even lots of big-time liberal lawyers are talking about this going, this is just the worst case we have ever seen.
Why not just make up a story and try and frame them about some fake story? I mean, that would have been even better.
Well, they've tried that multiple times.
So as most of you know, part of the discernment here is understanding that from before he even ran, or about the time, 2015, he's been under relentless attack. Okay.
Yeah. Well,
and we're not surprised, but it just
I would really want viewers of this video to understand is if you know enough details about the case that everybody says it didn't happen, how it's not a violation, even if it was, the statute of limitations has been expired for years. Like there's literally nothing to go on here, right? So what I want you to understand is let's contrast that with, say, Hunter Biden's laptop.
Right.
Right.
That's a good one.
We have verifiable evidence that real crimes, significant crimes, not misdemeanor paperwork issues, significant crimes were committed and nothing has happened. Literally nothing has happened. The justice system has had this information since 2019. Nothing has happened at all. Yeah. So what you need to see, and here's where the discernment comes in, you need to see the double standard that's here, and how people on one side of the political spectrum get away with anything they want. Hillary Clinton, Bill Clinton, Hunter Biden, Joe Biden, Obama, multiple crimes on that side, and nobody does anything.
It's not okay.
Now you go look at people on the other side, right? And not only have they been going after Trump, but they've also put multiple people in his realm in jail as well.
Yeah.
So every lawyer, literally every lawyer that represents Trump, they go after that lawyer and try to find something.
Incredible.
And keep in mind, right, this is a hallmark of, dictatorships and fascism and communism, which is you don't see a crime and then try to figure out who committed the crime.
Right.
You look at an individual and you say, let's go see if we can find a crime. Yeah. And if we can't find a crime, we'll make up a crime.
Yeah.
Right? Which is exactly what they're doing. And so that's where the discernment comes in. I don't care if you love Trump or hate Trump. I don't care if you love Biden or hate Biden. But you have to see the uneven balance here. You have to see how one side's being targeted and the other side isn't. And believe me, if you're full-on leftist and you love the fact that the justice system is being weaponized against Trump and Republicans, just remember, it is only a matter of time before they come for you.
That's right. So we have certain piece of this is not only directed at Trump, but really to set a precedent or to give people the impression that our justice system is completely shattered and that we're all vulnerable to these unfounded attacks or allegations perhaps. And I think this is where the intimidation, we need to have discernment to not allow it to work.
Well,
right?
The
fear, because this is what so many, Mark Levin and other people were coming out and saying like, oh, I'm so worried about this. This is so concerning, because if they're doing this to him, this is going to be, the new standard of like, we all should be concerned. And then in counter, right, is how that this can just be flipped onto other potential political people.
So people like Levin are right. You should be worried about this. Exactly what I just said. You should be worried because they are coming for you next, right? However, the system is not using this as a way to intimidate you. The system wants you to think that this is actual justice. Right? So don't get sucked into that. They're doing this on purpose because they want you to be afraid of them. No.
Right.
No. They want you to think, because this is what they're telling you. This is their messaging all day long. They want you to think that this is actually a fair and functioning justice system when it is not in any way, shape, or form.
No.
And hasn't been for a long time, even long before any of these things happen.
Right. So that is about all we can probably summarize on that one. It was definitely a juicy issue that I feel has been so fabricated in so many ways and really charaded on certain news publications and drawn up and just, fluffed up. And this is one of the things we also have to remember is that, whatever, media, social media you're on, you're probably in some bit of an echo chamber, whereas your neighbor could be hearing a completely different vein of information that is firing them up, getting them even more angry that Orange Man bad. And that
what I think about this one is this one makes me laugh because the first Trump impeachment, the whole Mueller investigation and all that kind of stuff was like, okay, there could be something here. Let's see where this goes. Of course, the whole thing turned out to be a hoax, and then the one after that with the whole quid pro quo thing, that was pretty darn weak. I mean, that case was really weak. And there's another example of, Trump released the entire call. So we heard the entire thing and we know there was no quid pro quo in there. But we've got Joe Biden giving a speech on the Council on Foreign Relations where he literally tells you he did a quid pro quo in order to get the prosecutor investigating Burisma and his son fired. And nothing happens to him, right? It's another perfect example. But be that as it may, that case was even weaker than the Mueller case. And the Mueller case was pretty darn weak. Now we look at this one here. This one is even weaker than the quid pro quo case. It's like each time they go after him, it's almost like they're running out of things to try. Like you've got your A plan, your B plan. Now you're on kind of like your F plan, and you're just like, I swear they're just running out of things. Like, we're scraping the bottom of the barrel for ideas at this point. So,
buying time and ruining themselves in the process. So
they're making it so obvious what they're doing.
Yeah.
All right, let's move on to the next story, which is we have an update on Chinese spy balloon. Remember my favorite story since we've been doing these episodes. Not. So what is the update on spy balloon? The update is the government now admits that the spy balloon did indeed collect intelligence while over the United States and intelligence from multiple military bases. So here we go. What are we supposed to learn from this? Well, what we're supposed to learn is that you can't believe a word the government tells you. It was obvious when that thing was flying over that it was collecting something, right? And then the government said, no, we know for sure it was not sending any communications, and there's no intelligence gathered. There's no need to worry, people.
Yeah. So
now what are we at? 2 weeks, 3 weeks later?
Yeah.
Like, it doesn't even take months anymore for these things, or years for it to come to light. A couple weeks later, we find out, it gathered intelligence, and it gathered intelligence on our military bases.
Yeah.
Do not believe a word they tell you, ever.
And so can we not also then now question that that's also maybe not fully true or all the truth, right?
Of course it's not all the truth.
So Operation Mockingbird, as many of you may have heard, started long ago, and they apparently shut it down, and it probably never stopped.
No,
right?
they never shut it down.
So
that's a
this
lie.
is one of the biggest pieces of discernment to have, to just really understand that when you're referring to the government, you're actually talking about these media organizations as well.
Well, because the media organizations are the mouthpiece for the cabal, the government, the regime, whatever term you want to use, the deep state, they're all in on it together.
Yeah.
But the point here is don't ever trust anything they tell you. And you're right. If they're telling us that it collected intelligence, then it probably collected a lot of intelligence on a lot of things.
Yeah.
Because if they're forced to admit it, you know they're not going to tell you the whole truth. They're going to water it down and make it seem like it was really not a big deal. But
well, the Epoch Times, which I enjoy, Roman had a report on this, talking about these satellites over Hawaii that are using lasers to do some sort of something.
Like everybody spies on everybody.
Yeah,
we're spying on the rest of the world as well. Like it's not like we're saints or anything like that. But the point is that people that when they hear the government say things like "Don't worry about it, it didn't collect anything," it's like you just know that it's bullshit. Just don't pay any attention to it.
Yeah, but back to the balloon story. It was just interesting that he had mentioned that the balloon was on its way to Hawaii apparently and got drifted off course. But
that is also BS. I don't believe that for a second. No.
And I think he definitely, it wasn't his reporting that said that's what happened, but allegedly. So I thought it was interesting.
Whatever. I don't buy that for a second.
Yeah, the way it behaved when it was over the United States was so.
By the way, look at a map. Look where Hawaii is, and look where the U.S. is. Yes.
To go up and around, that's way off course.
Now of course, it must have caught a jet stream. Yeah. Bullshit. Just don't. This is complete nonsense.
Way to lay it out.
All right.
Okay, so we have a little pipeline update as well?
Yeah, we have a little pipeline update as well.
Okay.
So Seymour Hersh, we talked about this in a previous episode,
that guy's
published this bombshell story about how the Biden administration blew up the Nord Stream pipeline.
What a boss.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
We haven't heard a whole lot about it since then, but it seems that the administration's getting a little nervous because they're suddenly starting to make a whole bunch of excuses for it. And so the update is that apparently Joe Biden met with the Chancellor of Germany recently and had an 80-minute long meeting with nobody else in the room, which is kind of rare. Usually when these world leaders meet, there's a bunch of people. There's aides, there's translators, there's all kinds of people. 80 minutes in a room alone. And Seymour Hersh published a follow-up to his original story where he is claiming that sources have told him that the CIA and German intelligence are working together to come up with a plausible story to explain how somebody else other than the Biden administration did it.
Yeah, because they did a very poor job at that initially.
Well, so
after bragging about the fact that they were going to do it, I mean, they really said, no, we will do this. If Russia does this, we'll do that. And
there's multiple instances of Joe Biden and several other people within his administration saying they were going to do it. But again, this show is about discernment. So why do we look at certain news stories, right? It's because we want to be able to look past the details of the story.
Yeah.
So here's the thing. When Seymour Hersh's piece came out, the first one, First it got a lot of attention, and then a lot of people started attacking it and saying, nah, this is not right. This is kind of BS, right? But here we are a few weeks later, and now we've got word that they're trying desperately to come up with a cover story. So here's the thing. If you're coming up with a cover story, then that means you're guilty. You don't need a cover story if you didn't do it, right? That's the discernment. It's like, wait a minute. If they're actively working and meeting with foreign countries to try to come up with a story, a narrative for this incident, then you know they're guilty. Because otherwise they had no need to do that. They would just say, nah, we had nothing to do with it.
Yeah. And this methane gas that was released in the atmosphere is no small deal. This was a huge environmental disaster that was instigated. And unfortunately, it's just creating an energy crisis. It's another fabricated energy crisis for Europe, and has kind of opened up doors for new players, some of which I believe are from Norway and other energy institutions. But this, just so you know, the whole energy crisis, the food crisis that we're all facing, none of it is organic, and it's important for everyone to have a sense of, so we can hopefully use our powers locally, especially, to begin to prepare for what might be coming.
Yeah, manufacturing. We talked about that with the egg story and the food factory fires, the hundreds of those that have happened. We've talked about how all of these things are manufactured crises. And okay, so let's move on to the next story, which is the Restrict Act, or the legislation being proposed to ban TikTok.
It's a big one.
There's a couple things we got to talk about here with this one.
Oh, yeah.
Here's the very first thing. When TikTok first came out, there were some people who got a hold of the source code, went through the source code, and immediately said, hey, everybody, this thing is Chinese spyware. It is literally gathering all of the data on your phone and sending it to the Chinese Communist Party. Everybody knew it from the beginning, and nobody did anything about it. Now, I had multiple friends when TikTok first came out who were like, check this out, it's so cool, TikTok, blah, blah, blah. But I had already read this story, and I was like, there is no way I am using TikTok. There is no way that is going on any device of mine. Not doing it. And I tried to discourage a lot of people, say, hey, you understand what this is doing, right?
Yeah.
And people, oh, nah, I don't have anything to hide. It's not a big deal anyway, but it's so fun and blah, 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 right?
Oh, please.
So now everything that was on your phone, all the porn photos that you took and everything else now all resides on servers somewhere in China. I hope you're happy about that.
Yeah.
So that's the first thing. But the reason why we need to talk about that first is because now here we are. I mean, what is it, 2 years later or whatever it is? And now suddenly government is like, oh, we need to do something about it. Now, granted, the wheels of government move slow, but that's not what's happening here. Right. It's not just that they finally got those slow grinding wheels to do something about it.
They're like, oh, here's actually a target that we can use to put in a loaded bill.
So Rahm Emanuel, who was a Democrat, longtime member of government, is famous for saying, never let a crisis go to waste, right? So what does that mean? Well, when you have a situation arise that you can potentially use to further some other agenda that you have, you should not let it go to waste. That's what he's talking about. So when we're talking about this Restrict Act thing here, this is what we're talking about. I have to admit, I haven't actually read this bill myself. And usually I like to look at those things first before I really talk about them. However, I have watched analysis from multiple people that are generally right on. And I've looked at sort of the landscape, and I'm seeing pretty much everybody in the freedom movement talking about this and calling for it to be completely destroyed. And so what's going on here is they're using the TikTok, under the guise of safety, and we don't want, Chinese communist. You never cared before about the Chinese Communist Party getting information. You didn't care when Hillary Clinton had an unsecure email server where they knew there were open backdoor channels straight to China on that server, just giving away information. You didn't care about the Chinese having information then. Suddenly with TikTok, they care, right? No,
Yeah, right.
they don't care. What they have done with this abomination of a bill is stick a whole bunch of stuff in there that has nothing to do to TikTok, with TikTok, that would give them sweeping powers to monitor all your social media and everything you do online.
Yeah.
This is not necessary. If you really believed that TikTok was a problem, you would simply write a bill. You could write it in one sentence. TikTok is banned in the United States. Period. That's all you have to do.
Yeah.
You don't have to write a big complicated bill with all this different stuff in it. They don't care about TikTok.
Yeah.
They're using TikTok and people's outrage, rightly so, over TikTok to try to do an end run around your freedoms and your free speech and take away your liberties.
Yeah, and that's where the discernment comes in, because it is not just collecting your data. It is actually then using and manipulating you ultimately with that data in ways that you can't even imagine. And this is where so much of our technology has been spying on us already. And we are, in a sense, heading into a technocracy framework by which they will ultimately potentially control our money and our food supply and govern which decisions you're able to make or not. And this is really serious. So it doesn't matter if you don't think you have nothing to hide. We all have something massive to lose unless you realize what's really going on here. And it's not just like, oh, it's just TikTok, or it's just another bill that is going to invade my privacy. No, this is about our freedoms and rights, and it's completely illegal. It's a complete overreach of power. And I feel it's important that we all talk about it with our friends and neighbors, so that we can hopefully have the discernment and the wherewithal to say, no, I do not comply, I will not participate, and we must stop this.
The whole "I have nothing to hide" is the dumbest argument I watch people make repeatedly.
I remember thinking it 10 years ago. I did.
It doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter if you have anything to hide
or not.
Yeah, but
that's not the point.
But so many people haven't thought beyond that.
That's the problem, and that's why we do this show, right? You need to think beyond that. It's not a matter of whether or not you have something to hide in this moment. Maybe you don't right now. Maybe you will later on.
Yeah.
But even if you never do, the point is the government does not have the right to any of that information. Period. Whether you're doing anything wrong or you're not.
No.
It's called privacy, and you have a right to it, a God-given right to it.
You're meant to be a private citizen. The federal government was put in place to protect our borders, and very little more, actually. Perhaps instill some roadways. Some infrastructure, perhaps. And over time, it has been abused and abused and abused to the point now where they want to have their fingers up inside every little part of your decision making and your being and your right to make conscious, healthy choices for yourself and your family, where they are literally implementing brainwashing and so much more stuff that is crazy.
If you read the Constitution very clearly tells you exactly what powers the federal government has. And then it goes on to say that anything not expressly written here in the Constitution, those powers then either fall to the states or to the people themselves.
Right.
Now, if you compare the amount of power that the federal government has now to what's written in the Constitution, you will see that there has been a massive overreach.
Crazy.
A ridiculously massive overreach.
100 times over.
Oh, probably 1,000 times, 10,000. It's ridiculous how much power the government has usurped that they are not technically allowed to have.
Yeah. And same thing with the states. But even still, the states are meant to be our smaller government within the bigger government and then local.
Yeah, so remember that says the power then either goes to the states or the people, meaning that not everything goes to the states.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So yes, the federal government is supposed to be restrained, and that's actually the whole point behind the Constitution. People think that the Constitution grants citizens of the United States rights, which if something's granting you a right, it's not really right. It's then a privilege, right?
Mm-hmm.
So what people really think is that it grants them privileges. No, it doesn't do that. It does two very important things. Number one, it enshrines in writing certain God-given rights. Whether you believe in God or not doesn't matter. I'm telling you what the founding fathers were doing when they created this. They believed that when you are born into this world, that you have certain rights that come from Creator, whatever you think that Creator is, and that government cannot take those away. So that's the first point that the Constitution is supposed to do. The second thing the Constitution is supposed to do is restrain government. It's supposed to be the chains and shackles on government to make sure that government does not get out of hand. That's what it does. That's why it expressly tells you what government can do and then says anything that we didn't write here, you can't do.
Right.
It is literally the chains and shackles on government to prevent them from overreach.
Yeah. So this is thank you for that, Kevin. This is so important. And, really freedom is not, in my opinion, and something that I just was reminded lately, is not the ability for you to do what you want, but for you to do what you ought. And if we don't understand that freedom isn't free and that people have had to sacrifice and fight and lay a lot on the line for your freedom, and that we are still the freest country in the world and we are a guiding light for so many other people in countries around the world, that we really need to raise our voices and do whatever we can to help preserve what we've been so blessed with. Given this document, the Constitution is one of the greatest documents that we know of that has ever been drafted.
And we don't have a lot of time left. There's not much of the Constitution left. It's mostly been shredded, but there's a few pieces left, and if we work hard, we can put the rest back together.
Yeah. So with that, always remember, united we stand, divided we fall. And thank you so much for watching. Have an amazing rest of your week.